we go to Stephen Fawkes. You are welcome to join me on stage to take over the stage and talk about energy efficiency.
Thank you, Jan.
Welcome.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about energy efficiency as I usually do at Ecosummit. It's a little bit off beam slightly because I'm not really talking about venture stuff, but I'm talking about growing the market for energy efficiency. And if we can grow the market for energy efficiency, then that's good for ventures and investors who have invested in it. I know I don't really have to persuade people about the benefits of energy efficiency, but I will just spend a couple of minutes at the beginning reminding everybody about the importance of energy efficiency. That was an aerial photo, or maybe a satellite photo, of Iraq's leading oil refinery a few months ago, thanks to ISIS attacking it, and clearly there's a lot of stuff still going on there which threatens all of our energy systems. We all know about Mr. Putin controlling lots of the gas. It's not actually Mr. Putin's hands that are on the valve, it's this gentleman's hands that are on the valve here. He's the one that will turn the gas off. And finally, coming to energy efficiency, there's been a lot of very good work that just came out in September by the IEA about the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. It's not just the energy that you save, it's not just about the cost savings, there are lots of other benefits, and those benefits fall to the host, to the system, and to society at large. And some of those benefits, for instance, productivity, employee engagement, can be worth 3 or 4 times the value of the energy efficiency. So we really need to start valuing those non-energy benefits of energy efficiency, as the IEA called them. So that's why we need to worry about energy efficiency. A lot of what I do is concerned with energy efficiency financing. How do we finance more energy efficiency? And that's what I'm talking about today. So a kind of quick report on the status of the energy efficiency financing world. I think everybody recognizes the scale of the potential for energy efficiency. I'd say 5 years ago that probably wasn't true. Now it is true. These co-benefits are increasingly recognized. And there's a growing interest from institutional investors in investing in pure energy efficiency projects. But there is a real sense of frustration about how slowly the market is developing. And a friend of mine in the States said the problem with the energy efficiency financing market is the ratio of conferences to deals is too high. It's actually getting better year by year, but it's still too high. So I sum it up like this. There's a lot of institutional money sitting behind the dam, a lot of potential, but not much flowing through. And this is where we're trying to get through, turning that potential into a very large flow of investment going into energy efficiency. And at the moment, it's just a trickle of investment going into energy efficiency. So the question is, what are the blocks, what are the building blocks that are in that dam, the barriers to financing energy efficiency? And these are talked about a lot. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are a number of really important ones. First of all, energy efficiency projects tend to be very small. There is no standard process for developing projects and documenting projects, and this is exactly what I'll be talking about. And there's a real lack of knowledge and understanding amongst financial institutions. And it doesn't really fit into an asset class. If you're an institutional investor and you allocate your investments according to asset classes, there isn't one that's called energy efficiency. Lots of other problems as well, but I don't intend to go into them this morning. So the important ones: no standard project development process and documentation, a lack of knowledge and understanding amongst financial institutions, doesn't fit into an asset class, and a real lack of confidence in the results of energy efficiency. You know, people like me who've been involved in energy efficiency 30 years always go on about how big the savings are and what paybacks you can get. But actually, there's very little real hard data that proves that. And so people are not confident. There are also problems like the performance gap. You know, we know that if we design an energy efficient building, very often it does not perform as designed. So lack of confidence is really important. So I draw an analogy with energy financing, energy supply financing, and energy efficiency financing. If you were, let's go back a bit, because I know the audience is fairly anti-fossil fuel here, but if you go back a bit, maybe 20 or 30 years, or even today, if you are lucky enough to own an oil or a gas field, there are very standard processes that you follow for developing that project. There's also very standard documentation for how you document that project and go to a bank or an investor. And those are set out by organizations like the Society of Petroleum Engineers, the American Petroleum Geologists Association, World Energy Council. Very standard. And if you go with your project that you've developed and you don't have those documents and you go to an investor or a bank, they'll very quickly say, there's the door. So, and in fact, some of those documentation standards are set by stock exchanges or the SEC stock exchange here. You go with an oil and gas project, you need documents that are very standardized. And as a result of that standardization, there's a lot of capacity in banks. And you can go down the road back into the city and go into almost every bank and find an oil and gas team that's got a lot of capacity. And a lot of funds flow into oil and gas for that reason. Now, the other side of the analogy, if you look at energy efficiency, there is no standard development process. Every project is developed in a very ad hoc way. I could go out in the market, find 10 people to look at any particular building, 10 different energy experts, and they would develop the projects in 10 different ways. I guarantee it. Documentation, same. No standard documentation. And as a result of this, there's very little capacity in the market, very little capacity in banks, and very little deal flow. So, and if you're a bank or a financial institution, you cannot build capacity around ad hoc processes. Banks are only factories, after all. They need standard processes. So that's the analogy. So the question is, how do you get these guys, the institutional investors, to invest more in energy efficiency? And the project that I'm going to talk about today is called the Investor Confidence Project, which, as my American friends will say, does exactly what it says on the tin. It's about increasing investor confidence in energy efficiency. And I will explain a bit about it and then tell you what we're doing in Europe. So, as I say, one of the problems with energy efficiency projects is everybody does things in a different way. What is an energy efficiency project? One developer or company can develop it in a certain way through this alphabet soup of standards and systems that people use. Other people can do it this way, or they can do it this way. Everybody does it differently. What the Investor Confidence Project has done in the US, and it's been running about 4 years in the US now, has set a series of protocols that go right the way through that development process, from baselining your energy consumption, calculating savings, design, construction, commissioning, into O&M, and then measurement and verification. So it's not about writing new standards, it's about sort of ordering and standardizing the way that the existing documents are used. And there are 6 protocols that have been released in the US, covering large commercial buildings, big projects, whole building retrofits, smaller commercial projects, single measures, and then multifamily, so apartment blocks and so on. And then also in the US, I'll talk a bit more about this, very close to releasing a kind of quality assurance mark and specification. Lot of allies, a lot of organizations have signed up to this. This is an open source system. Anybody can sign up, and I'd encourage you to look at it and sign up if you have any interest in energy efficiency at all. And there are banks, investors, other financial investors, insurance companies, project developers, ESCOs, states, cities, all kinds of allies have signed up. I said earlier about a quality assurance stamp. This is the ultimate aim. The ultimate aim is that if a project is developed according to an investor confidence project protocol, it will have this stamp saying it is investor-ready energy efficiency. And this is all about reducing due diligence cost. If you're looking at 10 of these projects or 100 of these projects, to aggregate them. It's really important that everything is done in the same way and that you know that it's been done to this standard. So that QA system, quality assurance system, is going to be released in the US in the next couple of months. So I'll just talk about a little bit about where they've got to in the US and then what's happening in Europe. So in San Francisco, the city of San Francisco is embedding this investor confidence project into all of its energy efficiency projects and programs. Various utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric, people like that, are moving towards it. In New York, you have a lot of different programs. You have New York City, New York State, New York Green Bank. I lost track of the number of NY acronyms there are in New York to do with energy efficiency. But they're moving towards, again, embedding investor confidence project into all of their processes and programs. And then the one that's always slightly surprising, Texas, I think I've talked about before, and you're probably familiar with PACE, which is Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a system for paying back investments in clean energy on your local property taxes. In Texas, they have a system called PACE in a Box, which again is a kind of snappy title. And PACE in Texas, if you do a PACE project in Texas, you have to use the Investor Confidence Project protocols. So it's becoming embedded. There's a lot of other projects and programs, a lot of city programs, state programs that are adopting this. So it's rapidly becoming the norm. So Investor Confidence Project Europe, I've been working to bring the idea to Europe for about 18 months now. We now have funding, and we are launching officially on the 5th of November in Brussels. We have about 45 stakeholders signed up, good combination of investors, banks, project developers, ESCOs, cities, a couple of government agencies, right the way across Europe. We have a core steering group that's in place. As I said, this is very open source. It's very much about taking industry with us. Everybody needs to buy into it. And we will have advocates in different countries. We have 3 countries lined up so far, UK, Germany, and Portugal. And they will be the point of contact in these countries for the Investor Confidence Project. We also have a technical authorship team which will actually write the protocols, and that's a well-known major consultancy that I can't quite name today, but we'll be able to name by November the 5th. So I always like to kind of leave people with some action, something they can do. I think, if you have any interest in energy efficiency, check out the Investor Confidence Project, sign up as an ally. We're still looking for volunteers for the steering group and the technical panel. And if you're involved in any projects or programs that could benefit from standardization of project development and documentation, please talk to us about that. So just to finish, funding this stuff is really mainstream, really standardized, and big scale. And what the Investor Confidence Project is trying to do is trying to fund this, get to a point where funding this kind of stuff, major LED lightings, major building retrofits, to be very standard, very simple, and very big scale. So that's what I have to say. Happy to take some questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks,
do you have a question for Stephen? If yes, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone.
Matti Malkamäki is my name from Aurelia Tempest. Are you planning to integrate any industrial projects into this scheme, into this project of yours?
Yeah, to date, it has been building orientated. In the US, they're just considering what to do next, and the industry is one of those options. I think industry is more difficult because there's less standardization of projects on one level, but on another level, there isn't. VSD is a VSD wherever you put it. It's an interesting question. Where do they go next? And industry is a possibility. But I think in every energy efficiency, and I've done projects in buildings and industry for many years, there is a complete lack of standardization. And I think the other important thing is even if the investor is your CFO, standardization and greater confidence in the results, which this kind of process can bring, is really important. So I'd say, investors include CFOs in my mind.
Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Vitaly Lazorin from Nord Stream. And how would you evaluate the success of this project in the US? And what are the KPIs of this project in Europe? Because you are talking about investor confidence, so I guess it should be some amount of millions invested or something understandable to an investor. Because now it sounds more like increasing investor awareness of the energy efficiency, not increasing the confidence.
No, I think awareness is pretty good now. It still needs to be built up, but it's actually about increasing confidence in the nature of projects and the technical performance of those projects, and reducing that sort of curve of uncertainty that exists. So squeezing the curve in by standardization. And I think in terms of metrics, it's about how many programs, ultimately it's about how much money uses that system. And in the US, it's taken 3 to 4 years. They started from 0.0, which we don't have to do in Europe. But they're just right on the cusp of a lot of money being deployed using this kind of approach.
How many billions? Do you have a real number that you can quote or not?
Difficult to quote, but if you only look at what's happening in New York State and New York City, California, Texas pace, you're probably heading towards $1 billion already, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us today.
Good to see you again.
And enhancing investor confidence in energy efficiency. I think it's a good idea.